Hello and welcome to the Man Sports Fan podcast. This is not Phil Schultz, your typical host. This is Chris Smith taking the pinch hitting approach here, as Phil is MIA. But luckily, we do have someone to fill in, a much better looking person. We have Karl Krueger here tonight. Karl, how we doing?
We're doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you. I think you're going to fill in nicely. I don't know if we're ever going to get Phil back, so
No,
this could
I
be a
might be
big
a
moment.
permanent host now.
I agree.
I like it. And as always, we have the Fremdog Millionaire coming in with his blazing takes. And tonight's going to be a fun episode. We are going to briefly touch on March Madness, as we do each week. We're going to talk about the new NFL rules. As some of you know, we had some new rules introduced last week that we haven't really talked about yet. We're going to talk about the draft, which we are getting very excited for. We are in April, and the draft is this month. And then Karl is here because we are going to talk about WrestleMania 40, which is crazy to think about. And he's going to break down the matches for us, figure out what to look for. And if you're into that betting side of things, I think he's got some predictions on tap for us too. And then tonight we're going to close. We're going to talk about all the different things that we want to talk about in sports. And finally, break down some really important information about the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. You guys ready to roll tonight?
Let's do this.
I'm ready.
All right. So before we start, let's take some betting wages here. Where do we think Phil is?
Putting a child to bed. It's my vote.
I think Phil knew that you wanted to talk about Whitewater, so he went to go investigate himself. And right now he is stuck in the basement bar, whatever its name is right now.
I think that place has changed names 3 times. Yeah, so we've tried to call Phil. His phone is off. If you know anything about Phil, that is completely on brand for him. So who knows? He's probably getting a ride from someone somewhere selling something on Craigslist. Who knows? But Phil, maybe you'll join us later. If not, we got you. So having Karl here tonight, we can't forget to talk about the Real Men of Genius, which was the original flag football team in UW Whitewater. Also became a basketball team at one point. I don't know, maybe volleyball too. I'm not sure. But Karl was on the original Real Men of Genius team. He was part of some huge wins, some heartbreaking losses. Karl, what do you remember about the Real Men of Genius?
It was the best intramural team I think I'd ever been on, both in terms of success and just general fun. It was great. We always played the late night games at right outside Perkins Stadium, and it was always a blast. Phil made it to most of those, actually.
He did. You're right. Fremdog, what do you remember about the Real Men? You were part of some teams through the years.
Yeah, I was part of some teams at the tail end. I even took a team indoor, and we kept the name, and we're pretty competitive. We actually played you guys though one time. I was on the outside looking in, and fun rivalry too. You guys always had the most fun. I remember watching your games. I think early on when Karl was part of that original core, and some fun teams. It was just fun because not everyone like Phil will just keep blasting Phil. Not everyone Phil was the most gifted, but it was just a bunch of great guys playing together.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I do remember the year we broke up teams and you had your own team, we had our own, and we faced off in the playoffs and we went down. But Karl wasn't there. I think Karl was working at Menards or something. Who knows? He just wasn't there.
I was working at my college internship selling doors at Menards.
But did you save big money?
I made minimal money there. Spent most of it in store credit.
Love it.
It's awesome.
Yeah, so Real Men of Genius, we had some good years. We had one year where we were one game away from making it to Perkins Stadium in the championship. and I think we dropped an interception or a touchdown at the end of the game. I was one or the other. But that's okay. The player that dropped it ended up getting an interception in the national championship game a few years later. So, yeah, those good times. Another thing we wanted to discuss, but unfortunately Phil is not here, so we get one side of the story. One of the most memorable moments, I think, in UW Whitewater history is when Phil, who is perceived to be a nice guy on the outside, uh, he punched Karl in the arm. I think walking outside of the bars one night. And Karl, do you remember how we got to that point? How did we break Phil?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I'm here to talk about Wrestlemania, and this was my own personal Wrestlemania, and it's something that I've thought about a lot over the years. I remember we went to get pizza at Rosa's, RIP, I believe, and Phil was trying to open the pizza box and essentially dumped the entire pizza onto the table. Still great quality pizza. I think we demolished it. And as we're walking out, Phil has his own little language, so to speak, and we just kept repeating phrases at him, and he just turned and wailed and punched me on the arm, and it really hurt. It was one of those things where the next morning I think I texted you, Chris, and I was like, did Phil really punch me last night? And sure enough he did. I did not retaliate. I would never do that to Phil.
You're the better man. It's kind of one of those, like, you always know where you were kind of nights. I'll just never forget. And by the way, Rosa's is back. And
Yes.
I was there this past Saturday. And
Is it still good?
It holds up. I mean, it is definitely college pizza, which it's better at 2 a.m. Just say that. But
Absolutely.
there were times I remember at Rose's, like, the line was out the door at 1, 2 a.m. I would have hated to work there. That's all I'm going to say.
No doubt, yeah.
But
it was worth it.
Yeah, it was worth it. But poor Phil, he can't defend himself, but that's what he gets for not being here.
Guilty as charged.
All right, so let's transition to March Madness. Karl, you watching some March Madness?
I have watched very little March Madness. I was actually in Puerto Rico for a wedding last weekend, so doing those activities. So I haven't watched much, to be honest. And my bracket busted very early and very bad, so the motivation there is not quite.
I feel like if you're a casual fan and your team goes down early, that's it. There's no interest anymore. Okay, so before we get to the games, I want to point out that we did our March Madness draft on the podcast last week, and I'm sad to report that you have 3 of the Final 4 teams. I didn't even do a tally of the scores because there's no way you can lose. So congratulations. We're 1 weekend of the 2 in, and you've already clinched the championship. Anything you'd like to say for yourself?
I'm proud of DJ Burns and Roll Tide. Was really happy Clemson didn't win. None of us picked Clemson, so if Clemson were to have won it all, I mean, I think we all would have lost there. Yeah, I think this is just March Madness, and yeah, wild. I mean, I think even with all the NIL stuff and talking about what program is what right now, it's still really interesting. I mean, these are 2 programs. Obviously, everyone had Purdue and UConn there, but these are 2 programs with NC State and Alabama that I don't think anyone had picked. At least any average fan would have picked these teams. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting, and it's cool to see that wild things can still happen. 11 seed can make the Final Four, so it's fun.
It's interesting. Last week we talked about, like, it's all chalk in the Sweet 16, and now all of a sudden we have an 11 seed and a 4 seed making the Final Four. So it's just kind of interesting to see how that can work. What was your game of the weekend? What was the one that you just couldn't get enough of, or surprised you in any way?
Oh yeah, Alabama's been awesome to watch. Just the brand of basketball they play and the intensity in which they bring to the floor. The game against North Carolina was really fun to watch. That was just blow for blow, back and forth, up and down. game in the high 80s, and then the Clemson game too, and just on the stretch, I thought both those games were outstanding. Yeah, I mean, there's some other, I think, sparks here or there, like Creighton, Tennessee tried going at it. I think the Tennessee Purdue game with Edey putting up 40, I mean, that's got to be one of the best games right there of the weekend as well. But yeah, a lot of the other games, I think there's, other teams are pulling apart. I know when Shed went down for Houston too, that kind of just, it wasn't the same game. Still intense, but wasn't quite the same game. And yeah, UConn blowing out Illinois. I mean, I thought that was going to be the game of the weekend, but yeah, what a blowout. So, yeah, definitely watching Alabama was very exciting.
Yeah, for me, it was the Tennessee Purdue game. I mean, you got basically probably two of the top three players in college basketball facing off. One goes for 40, one goes for 37. I mean, if Dalton Connect had any help on Tennessee, they would have beaten Purdue. But it was literally just him trying to take them down, and he couldn't do it. You already talked about DJ Burns. DJ Burns was awesome. Just like your everyday guy.
Oh my gosh.
Leading his team to the Final Four.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. But yeah, it's just Marquette was a big letdown. There were just some teams that didn't show up. But to me, UConn going on a 30-0 run against Illinois is probably the craziest thing I've seen in a long time. The score was 23-23. And then, 7-8 minutes of game action later, it's 53-23. Just, I've never seen anything like that. So, we're down to our Final Four. Frem, you got a prediction on the champion?
As much as I would love to see Bama or NC State crack here, I think we saw Purdue right now is just way too dominant inside with Edey, and then I think same with UConn, right, with Klinging, Carbon, Tristan Newton, Spencer, their whole regime there. It's just, both teams are loaded right now, and I can't see either team losing. And I think it's Purdue, UConn, and I'm going to pull for Purdue. I'm going to hope that Purdue can, get some Big Ten love here and can take it home at this point. Don't want to see UConn win it back-to-back here. I'm kind of done listening to Hurley at this point, and just kind of there's kind of a smug look to them right now, winning game after game. And so I'd love to see Matt Painter and Purdue bring it home here. And I think Edey is really out to prove a point, because I don't think people understand. If you watched Edey freshman, sophomore, junior, like, he wasn't this dominant. Like, okay, yeah, last year he was coming up here, but he is just a force to reckon with in college basketball, and I think he will dominate DJ Burns, and I think Bama might give UConn a little bit of run, but yeah, I think this is Purdue UConn, and I'm gonna go for Purdue here to win it all.
I hope you're right. Big Ten hasn't won the NCAA tournament since 2000, which is just crazy to think about with how good the Big Ten's been. They just haven't been successful in the tournament. I'm with you. Edey's good. Like, I get the hate, but he's talented. And him against Klingen should be a good matchup if we can get to that point. Feels like it's going to happen. And I'm rooting for Purdue, too, for multiple reasons. 1, Big Ten. 2, my bracket. And 3, I have a nice little bet slip on Purdue winning the national championship, too. So got a little extra motivation for them to win it. So, and nobody wants to see UConn win it twice in a row. We still want Joakim Noah to be the last player to win 2 straight national champions.
That's awesome.
Anything else to add on March Madness before we move on? By this time next week, we'll have a champion. So it'll be pretty exciting.
Just want to note, Phil did not have any teams in the Final Four, so we should just highlight that as we call out our man who's not here tonight. And yeah, it's been fun. College basketball, I think, continue to process it as we move forward. I sent you guys a graphic. Just really interesting to see how many of these teams have had so many different transfers come to each team right now. And because it's the whole NC State roster right now is their starting 5 are transfers here. So I think another just kind of peek into maybe the future. Can the Badgers do this? You got to load up your team, and I think that's the answer here. That these programs that are, kind of power conference programs, but they're not elite programs by any means. This is Alabama's first Final Four ever. And so, can you load up and get the right players? I think it's a pretty interesting formula moving forward. Yeah,
it's sort of free agency, or as one guy on Twitter calls it, portal combat. It's kind of what it feels like. You can just go get whatever you need, and like you said, load up. There's no such thing as rebuilding in college sports anymore if you don't want to. So that part's super interesting. So yeah, we'll keep tabs on that. Obviously, Frem won the bracket pool between us. Phil did get last, so anyone that wants to chime in and give us a punishment, we will gladly take that. But I want to talk about NFL. And Carl, I know you probably want to talk a little NFL with us too here.
Yeah.
The NFL introduced some new rules last week, and there's kind of three notable ones, at least in my mind. The first one is the controversial hip drop tackle, which I believe is the tackle that got Mark Andrews hurt last year for most of the season. I think it got someone else seriously hurt at some point. I can't really explain what the tackle is. I don't know if either of you have insight on that. But what do you think about this, one? And two, like, what does this do for officiating? Because I feel like officiating is hard already. And to me, this adds another layer. So I'm curious what your takes are. Frem, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the idea here is player safety, right? So I think looking at the hip drop tackle one, and we'll get in here to talk about the kickoff as well. I think that's the intention, right? I think the hardest thing is, can anyone teach this, right? So, and then how is it going to be called? So I think those are going to be really interesting things to monitor moving forward. I could see people going either way, the one side of, hey, we're trying to preserve this game, moving forward into the future, like, hey, we got to make it safer. And then I can see the purists out there as well. Like what are we doing? Like, are we turning this into flag football? So at the end of the day, I think we need more information on this. I think we're going to need to see how this is called in this upcoming season, because I think it's going to be very confusing for players to figure out what this looks like. I think there's some examples out there. I think Mark Andrews right now getting tackled from behind, and they're trying not to tackle him into their hip or whatever, and dislocate something. But yeah, I think overall I get the mixed feelings about it. At the end of the day, though, I do tend to side with the camp that is trying to make the game safer, because hey, I've coached youth football. I've looked at the numbers out there and who's playing this game, and kids are going to other sports. People are playing different games right now. Things like lacrosse, soccer are getting really big at their youth level, and so you're trying to make this game sustainable into the future. We know a lot more now about what happens to the body when you're tackled, so it's confusing, but I do get the move to make it safer.
Yeah, and I think anytime you're adding a new rule where a referee is going to have to make a judgment call, you're introducing that human element, and potentially that opens up for some controversy. I kind of look at it similar to the horse collar tackle, which I think it's been outlawed for probably 15 years now, and very rarely are there actual controversies around that. There's occasionally it gets called and it shouldn't be, but in general, that is one thing that they did for player safety that hasn't really changed the game too much, and players got hurt getting tackled that way, and thankfully that's been cut down. I do think it's going to benefit the offense. I mean, when I see it being used, it's a smaller cornerback trying to bring down like a larger tight end or a larger running back. So if they aren't able to tackle that way, you probably end up with more broken tackles and, or at least yards after contact potentially. So I definitely see it affecting the game that way. But again, player safety, I think needs to be paramount, because if players continue to get hurt, you're going to lose your stars. People are going to get hurt, and that's never a good thing. And for the NFL in general, I think that they need to continue to focus on safety, which they're doing. But obviously, it's a pretty physical game that you can only do the best you can.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you compare it to horse collar, because, like you said, it's been a long time since that's been outlawed, but I think we all know it when we see it. So it probably gets to the point with this hip drop tackle where we'll see it and be like, yep, that's what it is. I think it's just, for me, I don't really know what it looks like enough to know, will I know when that happens, and will I understand why the flag comes out? So yeah, officiating is hard, and there's always going to be that human element that you talk about. But at the end of the day, it is about player safety. The NFL is king. You need your stars on the field. So I think it'll be good. It's just, for me as a fan, it's just going to be adjusting to knowing what that is and how that looks. And and this should be good. From you talk about coaching youth football. Like, what is the proper way to teach someone to tackle?
Yeah, that's a great take. And if you talk to somebody who, gosh, even played, I'd say 5-10 years ago and earlier, coached or played, they're going to tell you to put the head across the body, right? So if you have a guy running and they're going to come, head comes across the body like that. And now everything is keeping the head out of the tackle, right? So you're coming behind the player. It's, some people call it a rugby tackle. Seattle Seahawks coined it as a hawk tackle, and so you're coming behind the guy and you're using your leverage, your momentum to essentially roll the guy over in the tackle. You're keeping your head out of the tackle. So it's totally different though, because if you're running down a field, you're not teaching the guy to come across his body. You're coming behind him essentially, and then to wrap and roll, which, yeah, it's just very different. Players have adjusted. I think you see it a lot now in the NFL. That style of tackle, because I think, yeah, people know now, like, one bad hit and your head is out, and you're out for how many ever days with concussion testing and whatnot. So I get it. I think it's change, right? And people don't like change, and there's probably many old school coaches out there telling people to put the face mask, into their chest and put it across the the body. And but yeah, talk about keeping stars in the field. You want to keep your best tacklers on the field, and you gotta keep the head out of the tackle. So I think that's the tricky part, and I think it's tough to adjust to it.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of when the MLB kind of changed up their rules a couple of years ago, and everyone was like, "Oh, this is horrible." It's all the veteran players, right? Like, I've never done this, but now the players that have come through the minors a few years in a row now, it's just normal for them. I think, like you're talking about, just that adjustment period.
Absolutely.
Let's switch to the kickoffs, because this one I think is the most interesting of the changes. And if you ever watched the XFL, this is the kickoff they used, where essentially you have to kick it within, I believe it's a 20-yard zone. And if the returner catches it in that zone, they have to return it. There's no fair catch anymore. If the ball lands short of the zone, the ball automatically goes to the 40-yard line. And if the ball goes deep of the zone, I believe the ball goes to the 35-yard line. Kind of the oddity to this is that the team lining up, so the team that's kicking, all their players are on the other side of the field as well. I think 5 yards apart from the other team. And they can't move until the ball is touched. I'm curious your guys' take on this. Is this good? Does this bring back like the Devin Hesters of the world? Or is this something that people are going to adjust to quickly and we're still not going to see a lot of return out of it? Just kind of really curious about your takes.
I think this is the best change for the game right now. I think a lot of people are going to get behind this one. This is going to be easy. Tackling confusing, this I think is obvious, right? Like, we want kickoffs to be returned. I think the XFL had over 90% of kickoffs, maybe even 95% of kickoffs being returned. The NFL, I've heard their goal is 80% or more for kickoffs being returned. Right now, with how good kickers are, right, and touchback rules, people are just kicking the ball to the end zone right now. Very few balls are getting returned, and I think the goal is to have the ball be returned and this to be an active play. The key here is, right, the two sides are lining up pretty close to each other, so they're not running full steam at each other. You only have one guy back in that return zone, if it's called that. Right now, you have some really interesting things. There's a Gaelic football player who got signed by, I think, the Saints, and I think the Chiefs picked up a rugby player. These guys that can make like really quick cuts. I think it'd be fascinating to see who returns the ball. I mean, do you have the likes of Christian McCaffrey back there? Does you line up Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson back? I mean, who do you put back there? I mean, it's just going to be fascinating to see how teams adjust to this and who they line up back there. And then, do some other guys from other sports that are really good one-cut athletes get a chance to be returners in the NFL now. So I think it's great for the game, and if it creates more action and an active play versus this really boring, ceremonious, here's a kickoff and through the end zone, right? No one wants to see that over and over again. I think we want to see an active play. So pass to Karl here, but yeah, I think it's great for the game.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you made from about rugby players. Like it looks like a rugby game when it starts off the way the players are spread out across the field. I think overall it's good. I mean, we talked about like the game changing from what you don't remember anymore. I think the alternative would have been just the offense gets the ball at the 25-yard line, which I don't think anybody would have liked that. Like it takes a lot out. It makes it more like it makes it more like flag football or a children's sport. Um, I do think that even with the recent rule changes they made in the last few years, there's been a lot of touchbacks where basically the kickoff is meaningless. By placing the ball where they're going to after a touchback, they're incentivizing kickers to not, boot it through the back. So overall, I think it's good. We're going to get more action, more meaningful plays. There's two things I am going to miss, and that is the classic, the start of the Super Bowl, the kickoff, where all the flash bulbs are going off as the kickoff. We're not going to have. I mean, we're still going to have that, but you're not going to have all the players running to do that. And then the one I'm going to miss most is the fat man return on a squib kick or something like that. that is a play in football that we're no longer going to see. And obviously, it's few and far between, but occasionally you get the big guy rumbling and stumbling down the field, and unfortunately we're not going to get that anymore. But overall, that was an exception to the rule, and I think we're going to get more excitement. We're going to probably see either new types of players or players being used in different ways as you try to get the ball in their hands. You look at what the Packers did with Jalen Reed last year, is just how do we get the ball in his hands? He's a playmaker, and that this is another way that potentially they can do that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I hadn't thought about that, about using your star skill players back there, or just signing a guy just to do that. Because we've lost that in the game the last 5-10 years. Like those guys just don't. Like I said, I referenced Devin Hester because he's really the last guy I can remember that truly made a difference on the return game. So it'd be good to have that back. It just adds excitement to the game, and anytime you can do that and still keep the injury risk down, I'm all for it. And I'm really interested to see this come back in fantasy football too. So we've always had return yards in our league, and now maybe we'll finally get something out of that. It's just been stagnant for a while. So yeah, that'll be fun to watch. If you haven't seen the new rule, I recommend just going to YouTube and watching a video. It's pretty interesting. The other piece I did see, I just want to make sure I point this out, is if you can still do an onside kick, but if you do an onside kick, you have to report it to the officials, and the officials report it to the opposing team. So there's no such thing as a surprise onside kick anymore. So when Karl talks about like nostalgia or like things you won't see again, unfortunately, that's going to be one of them, where no surprise onside kick in the second half of the Super Bowl or anything like that. So, yeah, the third one is trade deadline. And I don't know if this really moves the needle at all, but I thought it was noteworthy. They're pushing it back a week. So it's after week 9 instead of after week 8. We know more teams make the playoffs now. So a lot more teams are in it through the year. But we've seen more movement in the league lately in terms of trades and free agency. Like just there's a lot more off-season, in-season movement. So does moving the trade deadline do anything for you at all?
Yeah, I think it's a good point Chris said recently, right? We've seen more trades in the NFL. I think, compared to the MLB or NBA, NFL has never been very active around the trade deadline. But I think that the big trend we've seen recently is injured quarterbacks, right? So many teams, I don't have the stats for me right now, but so many teams right now are not starting their starting quarterback by, week 6, week 7, week 8. So I do think it's really interesting to see if, hey, we're in contention, we need a QB. There are typically some pretty good veteran backup QBs out there making a move here midseason, given a week longer maybe to make a move. I like it. And hey, if the NFL can make a more active trade deadline and be a little bit more like, kind of some of those other big sports like basketball and baseball, I think that'd be great. I think that more spice, more buzz around the trade deadline, I think it'd be good for the game. So yeah, I think it's a good piece.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's gonna result in more trades. I mean, you're giving teams a chance to be out of the running and to realize that and to look, oh, how can we rebuild? How can we get those draft picks or those pieces to build on in the future? While you're also, the closer you get to the playoffs, you have teams that like think, oh, we can make this push. They might want to bring somebody in. The only thing I see against that is it's the NFL. A lot of teams don't want to bring in a player if they quote unquote don't know the system. Something like a quarterback, if they're have a different set of plays and stuff like that, you may not want to bring them in because it's the time it takes for them to get adjusted isn't going to be worth the cost of the trade. I don't necessarily believe in that. I think a player is going to go play as best as they can. I mean, you look at, I think it was the Vikings last year, where they brought in, I forget his name now, and he didn't know the playbook, but the coach was basically translating the plays to him on the fly. That's probably an exception to the rule, but I think a good player is going to be able to play. Quarterback is obviously the most cerebral, but especially if it's like a cornerback or something like that where they can just go in and rely on their physical ability, I think it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Quarterbacks that like it's just you're never going to see a big quarterback moved at the deadline. You probably see running backs, receivers, and corners and linebackers, things that's probably easy to plug and play. But yeah, I think it's good to move it back. It doesn't hurt. I think us as fans, we like movement. We like seeing things shake up. So it gives you one more week to see where you're at and potentially make that one move that gets you to the playoffs. And as we've seen nowadays in the NFL, you just got to get to the playoffs, and then anything can happen. So, yeah, definitely can't hurt.
I did hear an interesting story this last weekend. I think it was Brady Quinn was talking how he was brought into training camp. The team knew they were going to cut him essentially, but they wanted him there so he could learn their system. So in case they needed to bring him in mid-season, they could do that. Which is just it's interesting to see some of the mindset of some of these front offices.
Yeah, they're so interesting. I like that move though. It's pretty smart. I also like when teams bring in players that played for a rival or something just to get some intel on that team. It's always like that about football. All right, let's transition to the NFL draft. We are, 4 weeks away from the draft? So it's getting real. And there's a lot of good storylines with the draft this year. Frem, what are you paying attention to, or what storyline kind of sticks out as we get closer to the draft?
I think now the Bears, we know, right, they're going to draft Caleb Williams. I think that's become a little bit less of a buzz, so to speak. I think more just, for us Packer fans out there, we're just waiting for the Bears to somehow mess this up. Other than that, yeah, I think what quarterbacks are drafted really in, the top 10 here. Who's going to go? Is it, guys like Drake May?
I think we might have lost Frem.
JJ McCarthy, etc. So I'm pretty interested to see what happens in terms of quarterbacks, and say that top 10 range. I think teams like Commanders, Patriots are got to be eyeing up a quarterback here. So at least on that end, really interested to see where quarterbacks go. Also receivers. I think a lot of teams are going to be reaching for receivers. There's a bunch of stud receivers, leading off with Marvin Harrison Jr. here. LSU has a couple studs. So it's going to be really interesting to see where those guys go. Of course, I'd love to see the green and gold go get one of these guys. I think we know we need O-linemen desperately, and I think that's going to be who we target. And yeah, I don't love some of our first-round draft picks. Sometimes I think we're a little too safe sometimes in the first round instead of maybe going to get that guy that is maybe more explosive or electric. But yeah, overall, I think we've done, at least for the Packers, have done some good things in free agency. I don't see quite as much pressure on the draft right now, but I still think, yeah, O-line is for sure a position we have to go find.
Yeah, and as a Packers fan, traditionally the Packers have, later draft picks, in that 25 to 32 range. So, the draft is something that traditionally I haven't really gotten too excited about because it's by the time the players are there that you've heard so much about, they're off the board. I know that's a privileged thing to say about a team. But it is really interesting to see, those teams that are constantly in the 1 to 5 spots, teams like the Bears and the Cardinals, how they go. From you mentioned JJ McCarthy, it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. You mentioned the Packers, going and getting a player. I kind of lean towards the side of like get as many picks as you can, and because whatever percentage of them are going to hit are going to hit. Um, the it's interesting when you see it with a team. I remember when the Bears drafted Mitch Trubisky, they traded up to get him, and he still would have been there for him. Like that was it wasn't that they drafted him; it was they traded up to get him. That was the crazy thing. So we'll see. You mentioned how are the Bears going to mess up Caleb Williams? That'll be interesting to see. But I'm just the Packers vastly outperformed my expectations last year, so I'm excited to see how they can build on that. I definitely agree that the line was a weakness, especially at the start of the year. Jordan Love had no time at all. It was he was rushed. So if they can protect him, they have the pieces on offense that they can go and do some cool things.
Yeah, I think Mitch Trubisky's career was dead when he tweeted "Go Packers." That's all I'm going to say about that. Um, yeah, so for me, the most interesting storyline of the draft is once the quarterbacks go, there's going to be some really high end talent in like that 5 to 10 range of the draft. So if you're sitting at pick 5 right now, there's a really high likelihood you're going to get the number one position player, not a quarterback in the draft. And that's rare. Usually they go about 2 or 3. So if I'm sitting in that 6 to 10 range, I'm feeling pretty good about the player that I'm going to end up with if I don't need a quarterback. Or I could potentially trade down and get some pretty good value. So I'm curious what the movement's going to be as we get closer to the draft. Who's going to trade up? What are they going to get? As far as the Packers, I've been on record and I'll say it again. I think they need a star receiver. I don't think they have one on the roster currently. I think they have a lot of good receivers, but it'd be a big move to bring in someone who is a true difference maker on the outside. So that's kind of what I'm looking for as we move closer to the draft. Any final thoughts from either of you at all on the draft?
No, I don't know if I have too much. I think that's an interesting take, Carl. I think even as we look at some of the really good Packer players, right? They're found in the third and the fourth round, right? So Packers have their method, to their madness. Whether we always agree as fans or not, I think is really interesting because they've clearly found a way to. I think we said this on a previous pod that O-line just seem to produce linemen, even though they're not top draft picks necessarily. So I hear you, Chris. But even then, right, where do we find our top receivers? Maybe the second round, the third, the fourth, right? So we find our guys, we find a way, and I think that makes sense in terms of looking at like who we pay or where we put our money right now. So yeah, pretty interested to see what other teams do right now. Like for example, like running backs. I think we've kind of seen that position really, not be valued right now in the NFL as much. But now this last offseason, you saw a bunch of running backs get paid more with the salary caps higher. Yeah, kind of seen some running backs be drafted higher more recently. So curious what happens in that position. But overall, yeah, can't go wrong. Excited for the NFL draft.
Yeah, you mentioned going after and getting a top tier receiver for the Packers. I would say I would love that. Part of me is thinking like this was the first year that we really saw the Matt LaFleur offense. Before that, it was an Aaron Rodgers Matt LaFleur offense. So his offense is definitely a lot more scheme based. And my thought is the more good pieces you can get that you can utilize with your flexibility, the better that's going to be, rather than relying on one big star, which is what the the Rodgers LaFleur offense really relied on, pre-trading away Devontae Adams. So it's obviously you want the best players you can get at every position. I do think that the way that LaFleur schemes his offense is that you're not necessarily relying on skill. It's more on the scheme to have success.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And with all the picks they have this year, I mean, we know like kind of the trend in the NFL now is keep your salary cap low so that you can pay guys like a Jordan Love. So if you can hit on 3 of the 11 picks and they become starters, like that's 3 guys you're going to have pretty cheap for the next 4 years. So that's really the kind of the key to roster building right now is hitting on some draft picks and keeping your cap low so you can pay some other guys. So it'll be interesting. I know we'll talk more about the draft as we get closer. I know Phil, who's not here, is a huge NFL draft guy, and I know he's really sad that he's missing this conversation right now. So R.I.P. Phil. We'll hope to see you soon. But the reason we have Karl here tonight, he one thing I did. So for those of you that don't know, Karl and I and Frem, we all went to Whitewater. But Karl and I came in the same year, in the glorious year of 2007. And we went to different high schools. Karl went to
Sheboygan Falls.
Sheboygan Falls, and I went to Baraboo. But we actually met in the summer before college at a FBLA national conference. I think Karl was wearing a Whitewater shirt, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to Whitewater," and that was the start of quite the friendship here, Karl. But one thing I didn't know about Karl is that he has turned into a wrestling savant, and sent me a message a few weeks ago and said, "Hey, if you ever want to talk about wrestling, I'm your guy." And it's WrestleMania week. This is a big week. This is the marquee week of the wrestling year. It's an event that, if you've never seen, it is probably the highest attended event in the United States each year. It is electric. And Karl's going to break it down for us. But before we do that, we have some very important questions that we want to make sure that we ground ourselves with here. Fremming, I think we might have talked about this a little bit, but did you ever watch the WCW, WWE, WWF, AEW? Keep going with 3-letter acronyms.
I have a little WWE in my life, very, very small. I got some Cold Stone, Steve Austin. I know The Rock is. I think I know a couple names right now, but I'm here to be your student, Karl. Teach me what you know.
Well, we can start by Cold Stone is a restaurant that serves ice cream. You mean Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Stone Cold.
Wow!
So
there we go.
Maybe you're just looking for some dessert right now, but
I am.
Yeah. No,
That
so
was great.
I started watching wrestling. I was staying over at Andy Bethke's house when I probably 10 or 11 years old. He was like, "Hey, have you ever seen this before?" I had not. It was a episode of SmackDown. I believe The Rock was wrestling against the Big Show, and from then on, I was hooked for about 2 years. We didn't have cable growing up, so I was only able to watch SmackDown, which was on UPN or one of those channels at the time. But I would be, looking online for the spoilers from Raw and that kind of thing. After a while, I kind of dropped off. I would still occasionally like I'd be at a hotel or something or somewhere where nothing else was on, and I would watch it, kind of catch up a little bit. Um, but then I lapsed for a couple of years, and then maybe about a year and a half ago, I started getting videos on Facebook of like top 10 WWE moments, and just the nostalgia really kicked in, and I started watching it, and then some of these events that happened, and from then on, I was kind of hooked, and I started watching pretty in earnest around SummerSlam in 2022. And I don't watch it every week, but I follow up. The WWE's done a really good job of like packaging their stuff on YouTube and on TikTok and that kind of thing. So even if you're not watching it, you can catch up pretty quickly and see all the big moments.
Yeah, the key is the storylines. The storylines are just so good and well written. I started watching WCW when I was in 5th grade, and 4th or 5th grade. And when I was in 5th grade, I actually went to a WCW event that took place at the Alliant Energy Center. And I saw Goldberg and Sting as a tag team win the tag team championship. And it was awesome. And the best part is we went with my brother and my dad. And I just remember my dad leaving because my brother was a big fan too. My dad being like, that was the fakest thing I've ever seen in my life. And we were just like, we loved every second of it. And from there, I was hooked. I probably watched it all through high school. And then once we got to college, lost it a little bit, but still tune in for WrestleMania each year. Let's just go round robin quick. Talking about nostalgia. Who's your favorite wrestler growing up? And if you had a theme song, an entrance music, what would it be?
Well, I'm gonna call him Cold Stone now. Stone Cold. Okay, we'll get the name right. I remember the little wrestlers. I mean, I think Steve Austin was probably the guy that I could name the most, or I think thought was pretty cool when I was a kid. Not totally sure of his entrance song. I looked it up, but I'm not even sure if that's the right one. So you want to tell me what his entrance song is? Maybe I'll learn something here more.
Yeah, Stone Cold's it's like glass breaking,
Yeah.
and then it's just like hard rock. It's
Okay.
not really a licensed song, but I think a lot of the times the WWE and those companies, they try not to license music because they have to pay for that, obviously. So you only get it for special things.
I could
For
do something
me,
for Cold Stone here. We could get a little ice cream ad with Steve
Mhm.
Austin. I'm gonna send something to them.
It's an endorsement waiting to happen.
yeah, who knew that
absolutely.
this episode? Who knew this episode was going to be sponsored by Cold Stone?
Oh, coming in like the
look at that!
Undertaker.
Oh my God, it's
Here we
the
go.
Phil's music.
All right, so here's the thing. Phil is here.
Can't hear any of you. Hold up.
Love it. What an entrance. Let's go.
His entrance music is "I Can't Hear You." Carl, who's your favorite growing up?
Growing up was probably Mankind, Mick Foley. I loved The Rock too. It was probably one of those two guys. But definitely, and I think if I had to pick music today, I'd probably want to go with Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. That's just get knocked down, you gotta get back up again.
You're never gonna keep me down.
Exactly.
So I already tipped my hand. I was a huge Goldberg fan. I was obsessed with Goldberg, and I remember the streak well when he was undefeated. He just kept winning. It was like the coolest thing ever. I felt awesome, and then just the NCW or WCW NWO. God, it was awesome. You're the team Wolfpack, red team, white team. So my entrance music, if I had to pick now, I think I thought about this. I think it would be Sandstorm because I feel like that could get the people going a little bit. And Phil, welcome. It's great to see
Hello, everybody. Yeah, glad to be here. Carl, this was a test. Do you feel like you were better than me as host / third person in?
I like to think so. You showing up an hour late is the most on-brand thing to happen with our friendship I think that's ever happened. So it's good to see you, Phil.
I thought of the jeans as I was driving, and I realized that you'd all started without me. So, hey, good to be back. We're talking about WrestleMania, yeah?
Yeah, so we're talking about who's your favorite wrestler growing up, and what would your entrance theme song be?
You guys have talked about a lot of stuff already. You guys have been efficient. You started the meeting on time. You're still going. Okay, so favorite wrestler. It's actually a combo, the Dudley Boys. They were one of my favorite pairs of wrestlers to be together. You also have the Hardy Boys that I really like too, but I like the Dudley Boys the best. But underrated is Gold Dust, who I think still actually wrestles, which is pretty amazing. And then I think for my theme song, yeah, this is really tough. I might go Genesis by Justice, which is like, if you think of like first EDM, and I don't really like EDM now, but Justice is like actually awesome. But I mean, I just love music so much. I feel like I'd be changing up my theme music, which is I guess not allowed really, but
Maybe we could make an exception, and only you would pick a song I've never heard of. Just going to point that out, but I appreciate that about you. You have a wide collection of music.
I'm glad you picked Sandstorm by Darude. It's good.
Darude, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it is time to break down WrestleMania. So we have our WWE expert Karl Krueger in the house.
As I say, I'm really surprised Carl even spoke before WrestleMania came up. You know what I mean? Because he's really the WrestleMania correspondent. I don't know if he'd have much to say about anything else.
I love this. Phil just comes out swinging. This is awesome. Phil, what you
Phil has a history of coming out swinging, as we previously discussed.
So you talk about the story.
Phil?
Yes.
What
we
you
got
do
the
not
important
know?
side of the story.
You got you got Rosas. That was talked about.
Yes, Rose was brought up.
Frem, what did you say?
We've been ribbing you this entire podcast, so you need to go back and watch the first 50 some minutes of this. We've been giving you a hard time, so it's pretty awesome you just come in here.
I don't.
Just
That doesn't
blast
surprise
it.
anybody. I know. I need to gain back my pride. All right. Sorry. WrestleMania.
All right, WrestleMania. So, Carl, why don't you just get us started here with a little overview? What's kind of the hot topics, the trendy storylines heading into WrestleMania 40?
Yeah, so WrestleMania 40, WrestleMania XL, it's been promised to be the biggest WrestleMania of all time. It is going to be April 6th and 7th from Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. I believe they've sold out both nights. It'll be interesting to see how if the weather cooperates. It kicks off at 7 Eastern, 6 Central. I don't know what time that is for you, Phil, but I don't know if that really matters. 5 o'clock? Okay. Set your alarm for 4.
It does matter, but
It does, because he never knows when to show up in time. So
yeah. So we're gonna run through the matches here in a little bit. I think there's gonna be 2 or 3 more matches that haven't been announced yet. That are gonna be on the card. Right now as we're recording, I think Raw has actually just ended a little bit ago. But so if anything happened tonight, we probably wouldn't have included that. But yeah, I mean the big stories is Cody Rhodes. Can he finish the story? Can he win the title? His dad never won. And obviously The Rock is back in WWE. He's the world's biggest movie star by some metrics. And he's just been tearing up a storm, literally and figuratively, as he's returned and kind of has shaken things up.
he's the people's champ for a reason. Cody Rhodes, his dad was Dusty Rhodes, is that right?
His dad is Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, and his brother Phil was Goldust. And you were correct. He is wrestling in still. He's actually wrestling, I think, under the name Dustin Rhodes. He's over in AEW now, which is a rival upstart company. Where I'll mention it a couple times as we run through these matches, as the wrestlers have gone back and forth between the two.
That's where Sting was wrestling, right? He just retired.
Sting just retired last month, I think.
Gosh, what a legend.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go through the matches here, and you can tell us everything we need to know, and give us your prediction, right? Because I'm going to write these down, and we're going to track how you do here. WWE Women's Championship. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so this is the WWE Women's Championship. It is exclusive to the SmackDown brand. You have Io Sky defending against Bayley. So Bayley started a faction called Damage Control shortly after SummerSlam 2 years ago, which was a heel stable. Heel are the bad guys, where face are the good guys. Stable consisting of her, Io Sky, and Dakota Kai. Io Sky and Dakota Kai were the tag champs for the women for a little bit. But Io won Money in the Bank in 2023, cashing in on Bianca Belair last year at SummerSlam. So she's been the champion for like 240 days. Over the winter, Damage Control added Asuka and Kairi Sane, who are known as the Kabuki Warriors, who are actually the current women's tag champs. And as they join, you kind of start to see some of the fractures in the group start to form. And then Bayley won the 2024 Women's Royal Rumble. And almost immediately before they could turn on her, she turned on them and challenged Io Sky for this championship. So my prediction for first one here, I think Bayley's going to win this one. It'll be interesting to see how Damage Control interferes in the match, but I think Bayley's going to end up the victor.
Yeah, you never know when people are going to interfere. It's like the one thing. Okay, so Bayley. We're going Bayley. Philly, feeling good about Bayley?
I know a lot about this matchup, and I'm feeling pretty good about Bayley.
Okay, I am too. I'm tailing it. Women's World Championship. Okay, so what's the difference between these two here?
Yeah, so WWE, the 2 main shows are SmackDown and Raw. SmackDown is on Friday nights on Fox right now, and Raw is on USA on Mondays.
I'm glad it's still on Mondays.
Yeah.
I didn't actually know if that was going on. That's awesome.
It's actually moving to Netflix in at the end of the year, and it'll be interesting to see. They might move around on some nights depending on obviously during Monday Night Football they struggle, so they might move it around a bit. But the difference is essentially they have their own sets of championships. It's nice because it gives different performers different spotlights, but it is a little hard to keep track of which one is which sometimes. So this is the Women's World Championship. So are you guys familiar with Mommy?
No.
So this is Rhea Ripley is the current champion. She's going to be facing Becky Lynch. So Rhea is a member of Judgment Day, another heel faction. With her nickname, one of her nicknames is Mommy, which was given to her by Dominic Mysterio, who is the son of the great Rey Mysterio. Other members of this faction are Damian Priest, Finn Balor, and JD McDonough. And Judgment Day has been one of the more interesting storylines on Raw over the last few years. They're kind of like an evil. They started as like a supernatural, but now they're more of just like a biker gang, and they're a lot of fun. So Rhea won the 2023 Women's Royal Rumble and defeated Charlotte Flair at last year's WrestleMania. It won Match of the Year awards. It was really good, and Rhea's just dominated the women's division on Raw since then. Every match, pretty much, she's been guaranteed to win. Becky, she's one of the most popular wrestlers, men or women, and she's been not really involved in the title scene over the last couple of years, but she won the Elimination Chamber in Perth, Australia, 2 months ago, to earn her chance to face Rhea. And
why is she called the Man?
The Man, because she's tough. She actually had her nose broken in real life by a wrestler in a match a couple of years ago, and she was like, "I'm tough. I'm a man." So I think she has one of the best theme songs in the game.
So who you picking to win?
Who I'm picking to win? I'm picking Rhea Ripley to win this matchup.
I remember that match last year with Charlotte Flair. That was a good match.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you. So we're riding Rhea Ripley. I'm in. Can't wait to watch now, even more. Intercontinental Championship. This one goes back.
Yeah. This is one of the OG WWE titles. It's had some legends have held it. Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, Chris Jericho, amongst others. Currently, it is held by Gunther, the Austrian. So this is his first reign as the Intercontinental Champion. It's been a record 661 days, which is the longest ever, even passing the Honky Tonk Man. Phil, are you familiar with the Honky Tonk Man?
I am not familiar. No.
He was. Yeah, this is before my time. He had a guitar. I don't know it. I don't want to talk about that too much. But Gunther doesn't really have a defined finisher. But he's dominant. He's a badass. He's a future world champion, and he just messes people up. He's fighting against Sami Zayn, who actually I'm wearing a Sami Zayn shirt right now that I bought last year. So Sami Zayn was in the Bloodline, which we'll talk more about the Bloodline in a little bit. But he's kind of one of the main catalysts for the Bloodline starting to split up. He actually won the tag titles with Kevin Owens against the Usos at night 1 of WrestleMania last year. And they eventually lost the tag titles in the last year, and he's been having kind of a crisis of confidence in recently. But he's kind of started to get his mojo back, and he actually earned this title shot against Gunther in a gauntlet match on Raw a few weeks ago. So gauntlet matches are two people are in the ring. When one person gets pinned, somebody else enters, and whoever's the last person standing is the winner. So I think a lot of people think Gunther's going to win this. I think there's going to be an upset where Sami Zayn ends up winning this. Gunther is going to headline. They're having a show in Berlin in August. I think he's going to be involved with that in the world title picture.
Nice. Do you look at betting odds at all, Carl?
Do I look at betting odds? No, I don't.
Okay.
Admittedly, like I know that this is fake. So I actually haven't looked at betting odds, but like I don't know how much I want to get into betting on scripted things. So
I agree. I'm just curious, like when you say upset, like how much it would be considered an upset.
yeah,
Interesting. Um, okay, match 4. We got LA Knight against AJ Styles. It's a
yeah,
battle of uh the acronym first name or acronym names.
those
I don't know if
are
that's the right way to say it.
initialisms, Chris.
Initials. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's why I'm
I'm
not
going
the
to call it
regular
an
host.
acronym. Looks like an acronym to me. So
yeah,
That's why I'm not the host.
yeah. Chris? Can you say that first name again?
LA Knight.
Yeah. So that is one of his catchphrases, where he says his name and then he says yeah after it. So LA Knight has spent most of his career in the Indies. He joined a couple years ago. He's had a couple different name changes, but he's back to his original character. Some people say he's a copy of Cold Stone or The Rock, but he's incredibly entertaining. The crowd goes nuts for him. I was at an event in November here in Milwaukee. He was awesome.
did
He's
Vanya
fighting.
go with you to
Vanya, my wife, did go with me.
Yes.
She had a fun time. I told her I'm going to this whether you want to come or not. I would love to have you, and she said she'd be down. And she would go again. I was teaching her how to say yeah for weeks leading up to going there after
That's
LA Night. So
that's awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yep, yeah. So we Ubered down there, and it was a good time.
By the way, on the chat, so from you call them Cold Stones, Steve Austin. That's awesome.
New ice cream, man. I'm just helping with marketing here. That's what I'm here for. New ideas.
I was gonna say, man, yeah, that's.
Trying to get that sponsorship.
Oh, and
Working on it.
Cold Stone Ice Cream. That's our sponsor. We just want you to know that.
Sponsor of the
Nice.
week.
Sorry, we're taking over. LA Knight, Law Knight versus Aj Styles. Tell us about them.
Yeah, so they've been, kind of feuding back and forth for the last couple months, interfering in each other's titles matches. They were both in a fatal 4-way against Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble, which Roman won. And what was probably considered the hater moment of the year, AJ flew 14 hours to Perth, Australia, only to interfere in LA Knight's match before getting back on a plane and flying back. So I think LA Knight's going to win this one. It should be a pretty good match. We'll see how they push LA Knight going forward.
So your prediction is
LA Knight.
yeah.
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 All right. U.S. Championship, another classic belt here.
Yeah.
Yep. And I see some names that really intrigue me. So I want to learn more.
Yeah. So Frem, what's your opinion on Logan Paul?
Ooh, Logan Paul. Head case, I think comes to mind. Yeah, not a really big Logan Paul fan. I don't think he's very good. I think he's kind of like a YouTuber, just is good at getting clicks and likes and attention, but doesn't have the skill to back up his mouth. So, not saying I want Logan to come find me. I don't want that smoke, but I do not think he's all that. So.
Yeah. So he is the current U.S. champion. He is, I would say, not a good person. He is an amazing wrestler and an amazing heel. So it's an interesting, dichotomy there. He is defending in a triple threat match against, Randy Orton, the Viper. He's a classic that everyone probably knows, and Kevin Owens, who's been around a long time too. Logan Paul's been wrestling for about 2 years on and off, and he's not like a full-time guy, but he's very athletic and he understands the business. Randy Orton was injured for a couple of years and he came back in November, and then all three of them have been having run-ins with each other, and Kevin Owens and Randy Orton were actually in a number one contender match when Logan Paul interfered. The general manager of SmackDown said, you know what, now you can face both of them. So this is probably one of the hardest ones to pick. I'm picking Kevin Owens. I think it could go any way here.
Is Logan Paul the one that it's also going to be boxing?
No,
Yeah.
that
What's
is
his
his
face?
brother Jake Paul, who's
Okay.
even a worse person. And there the rules for him fighting Mike Tyson is like Logan Paul can actually like tag in at certain points, and it's not quite boxing, not quite wrestling. So
Okay.
I'm not gonna spend my money on it. Maybe I'll torrent it or something. But we'll see if Mike Tyson knocks him out. I'd definitely be interested in seeing that.
Yeah. Okay.
Good
I
question.
saw that
So,
he was brothers with Jake Paul. Yeah, I honestly didn't know the difference, and so
I
yeah,
actually
okay.
thought it was Jake when I think Carl asked me. That's what went through my head. So once again, more education. That's why
You
I
know
have
what?
Carl.
Your answer worked for both of them. So
Cool.
Yeah, I'm rooting for Randy Orton just because I love Randy Orton. So I don't know if he's got a shot. That's what I'm going with.
I think he has a shot.
Good. All right, next matchup. I'm assuming we have brothers. Jay
We
Uso versus Jimmy Uso.
do. So let me ask you: do you guys remember Rikishi?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
referenced him on an earlier podcast.
Did you? Nice. Yeah, he's a member of Too Cool. You know, he delivered the stink face. Well, he has 3 sons. Two of them being Jimmy and Jay Uso, who are twins, and he has a third son, Solo Sikoa. So they are cousins to Roman Reigns, cousins to The Rock. They were all members of the Bloodline. As members of the Bloodline, Jimmy and Jay were the longest reigning tag champs of all time. They unified the titles, which they lost last year at WrestleMania Night 1 to Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. After that loss, they both eventually quit the Bloodline, had a match against Roman and Solo Sikoa, and then Jimmy rejoined the Bloodline, has been interfering with Jay, ever since. So this is finally, brother versus brother. It's coming to a head, Jimmy versus Jay. And I was really hoping we would get Rikishi as like a special guest referee. No word on that yet, but to be seen, I guess. And my prediction here is main event Jay Uso.
Jay Uso. All right. Next one sounds like a heck of a match here. 6-team ladder match for the tag team titles. This sounds like a 45-minute match waiting to happen.
I think it will be that. It is going to be crazy. There's going to be people doing death-defying stunts. It might steal the WrestleMania. We'll see. It is like you said, Chris. There's 6 teams. The Judgment Day, who are the champions, Finn Balor and Damian Priest, against DIY, who's Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. The Awesome Truth, which is R-Truth, who's a comedy great and a wrestling great, versus The Miz, who you may be familiar with. The other 3 teams are the New Day, Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, who they've been around for a long time. And then 2 newer teams, A-Town Down Under, which is Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, and the New Catch Republic, which is Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate. Now, they unified these tag titles 2 years ago, and there's a lot of really good tag teams in WWE. I kind of foresee them splitting up these tag teams as part of this. They haven't announced it yet, but I think this is going to be an opportunity for them to actually have 2 different teams watch away, because it's a ladder match. So what the team that wins has to do is climb a ladder, take the belt off of a hook. So this is going to be a way where potentially they could split it up in that way. I think Awesome Truth is going to walk away with one set, and New Catch Republic's going to walk away with the other.
Sounds like an awesome match.
I don't remember ever there being this kind of craziness with this many teams. I think when I watched back in the day, it was like 3, maybe 4, because I knew what the ladder match was, but not to like this, kind of mayhem or chaos,
Yeah, I think that the first couple like ladder matches, it was the Dudley Boys, the Hardy Boys, and Edge and Christian. And that was 3 teams, and this is obviously double that.
That was awesome. I remember that, actually.
Yeah.
That
was awesome.
I think they did it in back-to-back years.
All right, so our next match, if I'm reading this right, it feels like a 3 versus 1, but I could be wrong. Damage Control could be multiple people.
Yep, Damage Control is multiple people.
Okay, so we got Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill, and Naomi versus Damage Control. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so Damage Control, they are the other members of the faction with Io Sky, who we talked about earlier. It's Dakota Kai, Asuka, and Kairi Sane. Kairi Sane and Asuka are the women's champions right now, and they're obviously taking on those other three women. Naomi is a former champion who was gone for a while. She's back now. Bianca Belair is like the longest reigning women's champion. But the person to watch here is Jade Cargill. She is new WWE. She was in AEW for a couple of years. She's pretty young. She is the most incredibly fit person I've ever seen in my entire life. She looks like a Greek statue. You can go watch her intro video from last week. She's just a very impressive being, and I think she's a star to come for many years. So it's if you want to get in early, buy stock in Jade Cargill now, because I think she's going to be a future champion at some point. And I think her team's going to win in this matchup.
You know who she's married to?
Who?
Brandon Phillips.
Really?
Really? Just a fun fact.
Love it.
That's actually pretty awesome.
So random.
Little second base, Cincinnati Reds. Here we go.
Yeah.
Well played.
All right, so we're getting to the good stuff now, right? We got the main events. We got some big names. We got a title that's been held for multiple years. Let's talk about main event night one.
That is correct. Phil, can you smell what The Rock is cooking?
I can. I can smell what The Rock is cooking. Give me some people's elbow.
I will, Phil, if I can. So, WrestleMania night one main event is going to be Roman Reigns and The Rock against Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. So, a little bit of backstory. I'm going to introduce all four people, and then we'll get into kind of where they're at now, because this is really this is a multi-year saga that we're kind of dealing with. So you have Roman Reigns. He's been the face of WWE for almost a decade. He's been the Universal Champion for almost 4 years. He unified it with the WWE Championship. 2 years ago, only 3 men have held the title longer than him in WWE. The only annoying thing is he's not around a ton. He's kind of a part-timer. But when he is around, it's much CTV. And he is cousins with The Rock. The Rock, obviously, he's The Rock. He's the biggest movie star in the world. He's the hero of our childhoods. He's also a member of the board of TKO, which owns WWE. So that's just an interesting little wrinkle there. They are facing against Cody Rhodes, who's the son of Dusty Rhodes, brother to Goldust. He was in the WWE in the 2010s. He left, went to the Indies for a little bit, was a founder of AEW. He ended up coming back to WWE. A lot of fanfare. If you want to go back and watch a really impressive match, Hell in the Cell in 2022, he tore his bicep a few days before. Went through with the match. His entire chest is purple. It's impressive feat of stick-to-itiveness. He came back, won the Royal Rumble in 2023. Obviously chose to face Roman Reigns, which he ended up losing because of bloodline interference. He won the Royal Rumble again this year. So I think he's the third person to ever win it back to back. His mantra is finish the story. His dad won a lot of things in wrestling, never won this title. So he wants to win it kind of for his now deceased dad. That he never won. His partner is Seth Rollins. He used to be a member of the Shield with Roman Reigns. He's the inaugural World Heavyweight Champion since May. Basically, since Roman was never around, they had to come out with another title. He hates Roman so much that he's going to be siding with Cody here. Cody's a former rival, so can they coexist? What's going to happen there? Will he betray Cody? Does he hate Roman even more? So we'll see there. So what happened was Cody won the Rumble in January. He immediately after he pointed at Roman Reigns, basically declaring, "Hey, I'm going to challenge you." He didn't make it official. Comes out the next week and says, "You know what? I'm actually not going to challenge you at WrestleMania this year." The Rock comes out and they stare down and then cut to black. Everyone assumes, hey, now we're getting Roman versus The Rock at WrestleMania, which would be cool. However, the storytelling of it didn't make any sense. Like, why would Cody's been talking about finishing a story for 2 years now. Why would he not go and fight Roman Reigns? Basically, the fan base revolted. We're kind of chanting, Rocky sucks at these events, and just kind of like freaking out a little bit. There's rumors, like, did WWE plan it this way, or did they see the fan reaction and then pivot back to we're actually going to go with Cody now? They ended up having a press event in Las Vegas where Cody said he was going to challenge Roman Reigns, ended with The Rock slapping Cody, and away we go. So The Rock has gone full heel. He has a new presentation, new theme song. So Phil, you are allowed to change your theme song. You can even change your nickname. The Rock's new nickname is the Final Boss.
Before you go any further, sorry. Yeah. What is the heel? Like, what do you mean by that?
So a heel is a bad guy, and a baby face is a good guy. So in wrestling, traditionally, you have your heels and your faces. So it's, the heels they cheat to win, and that they do bad things, where the baby face is a good guy, and, never say die, and that kind of stuff.
So is Stone Cold known as a baby then? And then Rock was known as the heel?
They went back and forth. So it's called a turn when you go from one to the other.
Okay.
Yeah, typically your more popular stars are faces or baby faces. So
yeah, because Mankind was definitely a baby face.
Yes,
and then I feel like Undertaker was the heel. Like that was
mostly. Undertaker's one of those weird ones where he, even though he was like a tough guy, was always kind of, if people really liked him. So it's
they liked his brother Kane better, I think, most of the time, if I remember right. Maybe I'm wrong though.
It went back and forth.
Okay, sorry.
But No, I'm monologuing here. I'm happy you interrupted. This is your guys' podcast, not mine.
Carl, you're showing your colors, man. I'm just letting you know. So
thanks. So anyway, Rock has gone full bad guy. Last week he beat up Cody Rhodes at the end of Raw, made him bleed. I was watching the start of Raw before we got on, and he was showing videos of children crying about what he did to Cody Rhodes like the previous week. So he's gone full in. So they're in this tag match. So the winner of this tag match, basically, if Cody and Seth win, night 2 will be free of bloodline interference for the championship match. If The Rock and Roman win, it's bloodline rules. So I don't know what that means, but it can't be good. So because of that, to add to the intrigue, I think the bloodline is going to win. Bloodline being Roman Reigns and The Rock are going to win night 1 of WrestleMania.
Last question. Freaking Rollins.
Yes.
Why is he called that?
That's just his nickname because he's freaking cool.
Okay, cool.
So
it's the PG version of Seth Rollins.
Okay. Yeah. That's the other thing, is WWE has been PG for 10-15 years now, because they have sponsors to keep happy. The Rock keeps dropping F-bombs and saying other things, and it's
he wants the Attitude Era back.
Yeah.
That's what he wants.
Yep.
Which I mean,
that's really when I watched. That's when I watched WWF. WWE was in the Attitude Era. That's like what I know. So yeah. So it's more PG now.
It is, but they push the boundaries. So they're pushing it more. When they go to Netflix, who knows what they're going to do?
That's a good point.
Oh yeah,
like that.
Yeah. So on to night 2. Seth Rollins has a match of his own. He's defending his championship against Drew McIntyre with special commentator CM Punk. He's going to be standing by. So this is for the World Heavyweight Championship. Drew McIntyre has lost to Seth twice for this championship already. It was originally supposed to be CM Punk, but he got injured during the Royal Rumble, so now he's just going to be a commentator. Drew won the Elimination Chamber to get to this match. It'll be interesting to see if Seth is injured from the night before, from the match with the Bloodline. What happens? Does CM Punk interfere? The other wrinkle in this is Damian Priest, who's a member of Judgment Day, is the Money in the Bank briefcase holder. Do you guys know what the Money in the Bank briefcase means?
You can cash it in, right?
You can cash it in a match at any time. So you can either start a match, you can turn a singles match into a triple threat match. I think there's a very good chance that Damian Priest cashes in. At the end of this match, my pick to win this match is Drew McIntyre, but don't be surprised if Damian Priest cashes in immediately after and ruins Drew's night.
I like that.
Yeah. So, and then on to the main event of night 2 of WrestleMania 40, WrestleMania XL. This is going to be Roman Reigns against Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. I'm expecting this to be crazy. I'm expecting lots of interference. You mentioned the Attitude Area. I think there's going to be people interfering left and right. Maybe there's a very real possibility that Cold Stone shows up. And
Old Stone.
Yeah.
Old Stone. That's right.
So we'll see. He's an old rival of The Rock. Maybe he comes in and messes him up. One thing to pay attention to is how does they want to do this Roman Rock match. Are they going to set things up to have this match in the future, whether it's at SummerSlam or one of the Saudi Arabia shows? What happens there? Does Seth turn on Cody? Maybe Seth gets mad that Cody didn't help him with interference from Damian Priest. So I think there's a lot of different ways that this could go, and we'll see. I think it's going to be a really good match. I do think it ends with Cody Rhodes standing at the end with the title. Finishing his story, but we will see.
So I remember this match last year. This match was awesome.
Yeah.
And I remember everybody was projecting Cody Rhodes to win. And I just remember how shocked people were when he didn't, and people were confused, like, where does the story go next?
Yeah. So WrestleMania Night 1 last year was probably like one of the best nights of wrestling television. Night 2 was definitely like the way it ended with Cody Rhodes losing. It felt like the Packers lost a playoff game. Like it was, and I didn't think I was going to feel that way going into it. I was expecting Cody to win, as was everyone. But waking up on Monday morning, it definitely felt like a Packers loss.
Yeah. So what happens if it rains?
I think they usually have a cover over the ring. I think that's what they've done in the past. But I mean, it's supposed to snow here in Milwaukee a couple inches tomorrow, so we'll I don't know, maybe it might snow in Philadelphia, but it's not the most temperate of places.
Right.
Why aren't they doing it indoors somewhere?
It's a great question, Phil. I mean, I think they're going to do it in Minneapolis in their stadium next year. I can't say why they would have picked Philly in April outdoors, but
okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Before we transition, Frem, you have to ask one wrestling-related question to Karl.
Ooh, I got this. Okay, Karl, drum roll here.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your favorite wrestler of all time?
All time? Probably Mankind, Mick Foley. Dude, love Cactus Jack. I am
Mr. Sacco.
Mr. Sacco, yes. However, I am all in on Cody Rhodes. When he won the Royal Rumble, I was alone watching it, and I put my hands above my head, and I was pumped. So
I feel like Phil's going to be a Cody Rhodes fan now that he understands the connection to Goldust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cody Rhodes wrestled as a character named Stardust for a while. There's actually a pretty good documentary on Peacock about it, but he hated it. So,
Karl, I'm just impressed. I mean, like, know the storylines, and like, I think when I was watching as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, like, I knew some of it, but I didn't have the full scope, and like, you just brought me back. And I also just saw the Iron Claw like not too long ago, which is about the history of how a lot of this all started. And it's just like, it is so good. It is so fun to watch. Like, if you get into the people and the storylines, like, it's amazing, So it's just cool to hear your heart with it, or like how much you know about it, because it's like, holy crap, this is actually super fun. Like, it made me like want to watch it,
Yeah, the storylines are exciting. I mean, these are incredibly athletic performers, and just seeing what they do, and how they basically put on a show where they're improvising a lot of the time and not doing it safely, but in a way that sends everyone home happy is really impressive. And then you start to understand some of the meta parts of it, the heels and the faces, and how that all works, and it's really interesting.
Well, I have to imagine it still hurts some. Like,
Oh
it's
yeah,
not,
yeah.
It's not just like, oh yeah, they're like, everything is like soft and they're like laying down like really soft things all the time. Like, no, it actually
Yep.
like still affects them and hurts them.
Yep. Yeah. No. People do get hurt. They break bones. They get busted open as when they bleed in a match, and you're gonna see some spots in that 6-man ladder match, 6-team ladder match, where you're gonna be like, I don't know how that person's walking right now, but it's fun.
So quick follow up. A better question is, who's your least favorite wrestler of all time?
My least favorite wrestler of all time. That's a good question. Are we saying least favorite in terms of like I just don't like anything about them or their presentation, or it's like an evil character that I
You want them to lose, like you want Cody Rhodes to win, like the Packers. Like you want them to lose, like the Vikings or the Bears. Like you want them to lose.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Logan Paul, I think is an easy answer. Like I don't like him as a person. It's the people he's against are usually really good ones. As a kid, I hated Triple H. He, he's always beating The Rock and Mankind, and it's that he's the chief creative content officer for WWE now. So he's running the whole show.
He's married to Stephanie McMahon.
He is, yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Shane McMahon was my least favorite, and he wasn't technically a wrestler, but I just
He
hated
was.
that guy.
He wrestled.
Yeah. If you go watch his clips, he jumped off of a lot of really tall things.
Did. He was dumb.
And Phil, you should go back and watch last year's WrestleMania. He had a surprise match against The Miz where he blew out both quads for real, like 10 seconds into the match.
Oh my gosh.
Snoop Dogg was this guest referee and basically ad-libbed where he punched The Miz, delivered a people's elbow, and then like saved the segment. So
crazy.
You should go watch that.
I forgot about that until you just said it. That was epic.
Yep.
Poor Shane McMahon.
Yeah.
For real.
So Peacock, is that where we're watching this again?
Peacock, yep. So if you have it for your Premier League, like I do, you don't have to convince your wife that it's okay to buy. It's good.
All right. I'm going to at some point this week turn on my N64 and play WCW NWO Revenge just to get back into it. It's one of the greatest games of all time. Anything else? Any final words for our WrestleMania people, or just our wrestling fans in general?
I don't know. It's fun. It's don't take it too seriously. And it's entertaining. And go to an event if you can. They're a blast.
All right. So this episode's getting long, but Phil joined us late, so we're gonna power through if you guys are good with it, because we got a lot to talk about here. And our next segment, we're bringing it back for the second time, around the world of sports. Everybody gets the floor to talk about whatever they want in the sports world. And Phil, since we haven't heard a lot from you yet, let's have you start us off here.
Yeah, so I think I talked about Chelsea FC, English Premier League soccer last time. I know Carl's going to talk about Arsenal, and I can already see the smirk on his face because he knows how bad Chelsea's been this year, which makes him so happy. But I just want to talk about Ted Lasso, which is also soccer related. And again, Ted Lasso's on Apple Plus. It's not necessarily about, the show's more than about, soccer or whatever. But I think what is really cool about the show is it shows the emotions of when you really are really bad or playing really bad, or that you're doing really good. And it's amazing. So again, this is like my second pitch to you. If you haven't watched any EPL, watch it on NBC Sports. Sometimes it's on USA. It's obviously on Peacock, like Carl just said. But if you were like, hey, on the fence, go watch Ted Lasso, because it's like a really good way to understand how British people kind of see soccer and how how meaningful it is in their communities. It also gives you some of the lingo that they make fun of Ted Lasso for, right? I think he says standings at one point instead of table. He says soccer instead of football. All these things, right? And it's just it's such a heartwarming show. Have you guys seen it? Any of you three?
Yep.
Okay,
yes.
good. Everybody's seen it. It's something that you go back to, especially when you maybe I don't know, you're not feeling good about life or something, you go back because it is just the show that you want to be watching because it just makes you feel so good. And yeah, you really do learn a lot about the culture of soccer and the culture of football there. So can't recommend it enough. But yeah, go watch EPL. Go pick a team. It's fun.
I'm going to say the darts scene is one of the top scenes of any show of all time. So good.
Yeah.
There's so many good scenes. Yeah. It's a great show.
All right, let's toss over to Frem. What do we got tonight?
Well, I called out women's basketball last time. I'm just going to call out again. I don't know if anyone watched what Caitlin Clark did, but she put on a clinic tonight. She's must-watch television at this point. 9 of 20 from deep tonight. I believe she put on, 41 points tonight against Angel Reese and LSU in a very competitive basketball game, playing Paige Buckers in the Final Four here from UConn next game. So if you're not into women's basketball, it's definitely worth watching here, Final Four. I think you're going to see some really high-level basketball, and I know there's some pretty crazy things being thrown around of Ice Cube is trying to get Caitlin into the big three for $5 million right now, and just some crazy things going on in the world of women's basketball. And Caitlin Clark she's has the most money and NIL money right now. And just her ability to shoot the basketball, and even if you watch how she just passes the ball on the court, she's different. I'll say she's different. I know people are going to refer to all the other greats in the game, but I don't think anyone has been like Caitlin Clark. She's changing the game of women's basketball, and I think creating rivalries, like with LSU tonight. And it's great for the game, and I think hopefully great for professional women's basketball to be more relevant. I think WNBA has struggled for a very long time to be relevant. I think Caitlin Clark finally has an opportunity to make the sport entertaining and something people tune into.
I want to follow up a comment with what Frem was talking about. My older brother, he's a revenue manager at Hilton, Minneapolis. Oversaw the Big Ten tournaments, right? Men's and women's. It was at the Target Center. He was telling me that the men's basketball tournament was half full in the stadium. He was telling me that the women's tournament for the Big Ten was sold out every single game. I think it just shows like Caitlin Clark's like impact on the game of basketball for college and probably for WNBA. You can almost see it's like you can see it. You can feel it. I think for a lot of us, we probably watch women's college basketball, women's tournament more than we probably ever have. And that's not just Iowa Caitlin Clark. That's the other games too. And that's because of Caitlin Clark, honestly.
Yeah, there's a lot of star power right now, and names. It's interesting that I can name like 4 to 5 women's college basketball players. I've never been able to probably name 2 before. But Iowa UConn, that's gonna be an awesome Final Four game. I'm glad UConn won. I didn't get a chance to see the end of that. So,
well, and I think most of the public would be able to name women's basketball players versus men's. Like just the general like average fan, like they know more of the women's names than the men's names right now.
You're probably right. Good take. Karl, what do you got tonight?
Yeah, so obviously on this first time on this podcast, none of your listeners know that I'm an Arsenal fan, Arsenal FC from the English Premier League. I became a fan studying abroad in London. I could see the Emirates Stadium from my bus stop, so became a fan then. Has been following ever since. They've been on the upper end of the league, but more towards mediocre for most of my watching experience. And right now they are in second place. I think there's 9 games left. They're in second place behind Liverpool. They just drew Man City 0-0. And I think it was the first time that Man City has been held scoreless at home in like 60 games or something like that.
Long time.
Yeah. So it's exciting. Last year they ran out of steam at the end, finished second. I think they led the league for the longest ever to not win the league. So it'll be, I'm getting anxious here as the season's winding down. But I just wanted to shout out to my Gunners, and like Phil said, Peacock's a great way to watch. The NBC does a great job of covering it. Sometimes the games are on USA. Any kind of soccer I think is great to watch.
And I'm a Chelsea fan, which is also set in London, and they're kind of rivals. So I don't like to prop up Arsenal too much, but Mikel Arteta is an excellent manager under Pep. They're going to be good for a long time. Pep's leaving probably soon, next couple of years. Klopp is leaving next year from Liverpool. So Arsenal could be the cream of the crop. Chelsea be kind of up there. There's the EPL as a whole is getting a lot better because there's a lot more money in that league than probably any other league out there. Man, it is fun to watch. It's physical. It's up tempo, and the lower teams are also really, really good. And so it's just a great league to watch.
Yeah, and if people are like, "Oh, soccer's boring," like watch the Premier League, watch the Champions League. Like it's a whole nother level. Seeing like the amount of passion the fans have and the quality of play. World Cup is obviously like really exhilarating, but like the quality of play from like the top level of the Premier League is beyond everything else.
It's interesting. So last summer or 2 summers ago, I got to do a stadium tour at Chelsea. And one of the things that stood out to me is one, you can just tell the passion that they have there. But a couple things were how cheap the season tickets are, like comparatively to US sports. And each game, they have to sell a certain allotment to the other team. So there's always like this section of fans from the other team, which I just think is a really cool model.
Yeah, the cool thing is all the away fans are in the same section, so they're doing their own chants, their own cheers. It's they're a different color than the rest of the stadium. Where you get that Packer fans go down to Soldier Field, they're spread out. You don't have that clustered.
Right.
I wish we sang more. Like I wish American sports there was more singing, because singing sticks more than chants.
Yeah.
And it just feels like if you go to a lot of sports games in the United States, like it's fun, it's really good, but if you added singing, it would change it. It would. And that's from soccer, from
Yep.
I'm here to drag this podcast out a little longer. I think you guys should just highlight, one of you, Karl or Phil, something they show really well in Ted Lasso is the whole relegation. I wish we would introduce this in more U.S. sports, but it's a really phenomenal concept of like, how do you make sure the bottom teams are always competing. I don't know if you guys want to just explain that briefly, but I think that's one of the coolest things of how that all works over there in the UK.
I would just tell you, and Karl, maybe you have thoughts of it, go watch the Wrexham documentary on Hulu. Because that really shows a lot of how that works. And how, important relegation and promotion is. Karl, speak more to it.
So for those that don't know, in English, or actually all of soccer outside the U.S., they have promotion relegation, which basically means the bottom like 3 or 4 teams get sent down to a lower quality league, where the top teams from that league come up. So basically, it means that rather than having the Bears, 2 years ago, they would no longer be in the NFL. They would go to the UFL or something like that. So it really, it makes your local team mean more, because you know that like if I support my local team, like in Wrexham, eventually if they win enough games, they can get to the top. And it really fosters that sense of community, rather than just the same 32 teams that no matter how bad they do, they're going to make a bunch of money. They're going to be fine. So it really brings the meritocracy to the forefront.
Yeah, there's more at stake. There's a lot more at stake.
And that, even if your team is really bad, you want them to win to stay up in the league you're in.
Exactly.
You're not just like checking out. You want to go support them so they stay in the Premier League, they stay in the Championship.
Yep.
Yeah, another good documentary is the Sunderland documentary, which is also I think it's on Netflix. That one's really good about all that too.
Yeah. Making Tom Brady owning Birmingham City relevant. Stuff like that is, I think, just really fascinating how these celebrities now are coming over and becoming part owners, and more attention to the game.
So how long is the season? Like, when does it start? When does it end? Doesn't it end in like September? Or am I way off on that?
No, it starts in August.
It's
like mid-August and then ends mid-May. But in between there, you have like other tournaments going on, whether it's FA Cup, Carabao Cup, Champions League. It's like there's a lot that you realize, like, oh, okay, they're not just playing their league games. There's like all these things in between, and the NBA actually took some of that with their play-in tournament. That was purposeful. They wanted to make those certain games matter more earlier. And that's why they actually probably added the play-in tournament. That's actually from a soccer model. Yeah, and we could go more into those things, and maybe we actually do a segment on it in a later podcast. But yeah, the Premier League, though, yeah, I think mid-August to mid-May.
All right. So with mine tonight, so last time we talked, I brought up that the NASCAR season was starting. We're 7 weeks in. I would say like the cream is rising to the top in terms of people that are winning races and being up front. So if you haven't tuned in, check it out. The other shout out I want to give is to the Disc Golf Pro Tour. I don't know if anyone watches disc golf, but it's actually taking off in popularity year after year. The amount of winnings and prize pools that they're getting in these tournaments just continues to increase. The season just started a couple weeks ago. It goes all the way through the summer into the fall. It's when the World Championships are. But there's just a lot of big names in the sport of disc golf. So if you ever want to check out a tournament, it's been on ESPN before. CBS Sports replayed a tournament once. I know people like playing, but in terms of watching, it's probably more entertaining than golf. And like I said, there's a lot of guys like Paul McBeth that people might recognize that name that are just starting to take over the sport. So just want to give a shout out to disc golf as we are entering the prime of the season here.
And it's produced really well. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Just a shout out to Chris. He's a really good disc golfer. I think that should be known. Everyone about C. Smith 9.
Carl's a really good frolfer. Chris Smith's a good disc golfer.
Yeah. Key distinction, not called Frisbee golf, but disc golf.
Karl and I once took a disc golf class in Whitewater with the legendary Tim Fader, also known as Darth Fader. And I think it was the inaugural disc golf class there.
It was the easiest A I've ever gotten, I think, for half credit. For something we could have done for free.
Right. It's good stuff. So perfect transition. We're going to end tonight talking about Whitewater. We're all alums. I think Phil's an alum. Anyways, haven't
I
seen
got
him.
the diploma.
I have not seen the diploma.
Yeah.
Came in the mail.
All right. Well,
had to take a summer class, but I got it.
Okay. Sure.
So we want to talk about Whitewater campus and then just Whitewater in general. So here's the prompt here. We're going most overrated, most underrated. And we're starting with the parts of the Whitewater campus. So most overrated part and most underrated. Let's go, Frem. You want to kick us off here?
Yeah. I think one of the most overrated places on the Whitewater campus would be... Great question. What is the most overrated place? I'm going to go the UC. I'm just going to go the UC. Hot take. You know, I think the UC is where... So I used to do tours for this campus, right? Like I was part of orientation. So like I know the campus really well. And I think the UC gets a lot of buzz and people love it. And they're like, oh, this is where, you know, meet everyone and kind of where the center of the campus. But honestly, it echoes really badly. And there's a lot of noise and you can't really like talk to a lot of people. And people keep passing through, especially if it's, you know, high traffic, you know, normal school year. So I think UC overall is just like a place to like the main like floor to meet. There's some other sections I think of the UC which are really cool. So I will give probably the most underrated space I think at Whitewater. We have a bowling alley, right? So I think like having your own bowling alley on campus I think is pretty amazing. Just like a super cool place to go, chill vibes on there. They have a bunch of places to like play billiards, pool, whatever. Billiards if you're more experienced. So I don't want to say the whole entire building in the UC because obviously the bowling alley is part of the UC, but I think like that main like level, the main hub of like you know you come in, kind of what you see like on a tour. And then I'll even call out. I think some of the trails around the outside of campus are really cool, and then even kind of getting back to the disc golf course, kind of the outskirts of campus, and some of the little trail and the walkways and pathways out on the outskirts of campus I think are really cool. If you're looking to get out, bike, run, walk, etc.
Love it. I believe Carl and I once brought our Xbox to the UC to play Madden,
I think didn't we rent it?
or maybe we
Like
rented it.
you early. It was something like it was near the end of the school year. You like packed up your stuff and like I think we rented an Xbox and you had your hard drive that we plugged into it
Right, and we played College Hoops 2K8.
for like
That's
4
what we did.
hours. Yeah.
That's what we did. Love it. All right, Phil, what's you got next here?
Yeah, overrated's tough. I mean, would you consider Foxglove part of the campus? Or was that outside it?
It became part of campus, so yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah,
What?
I had some friends that live there. It's way out in the boonies. It takes a long time to walk there. It's like a nice place, but you're like way out, too far outside of campus or way too far on the outskirts. So
Everything is above ground.
Yeah, I just wasn't a fan. I don't have that much other strong opinions about what's an overrated building. The math building could have used some updating to the point that I don't even remember what it's called. So, you know, that's probably the other main critique I have.
McGraw.
And then underrated was the library. You hear me out here? I had to go to the library to study because I struggled to study other places. And I love that place. Like, I have good memories in the library. It's not, I think they had really good spaces to study. They had a good computer lab. I just liked it. And I don't think a lot of people talk about the library, but I really liked it. So
I echo
What's the name
that.
of the library, Phil?
Love the library.
Come on.
dude, it's been too long. But
Anderson.
I did go back there a couple years ago when we were taking our tour of Wisconsin. Chris, we stopped at your place.
Yep.
And I went to Whitewater and I saw it all. And it was
yeah.
it made me realize how it didn't seem that big when I was there, but when I was in college, it seemed big. You know, it felt big. But I don't remember the name of the library.
Anderson with an E. That's what it was.
Let's go.
All right, Carl, what do you got?
So I'm just going to point out that Frem said his underrated and overrated were the same building. And my underrated is the UC, specifically for the bowling alley, for the pool. You can drink if you're over 21. Decent food. It was a good time. Honorable mention for me was the 4th floor bathrooms in Higher Hall. Like everyone in there, they're always clean. It was a great spot to go if you needed to.
I don't want to know why Carl went there. I'm not going to ask questions.
I spent a lot of time in that building in the business school, and you got to go. So it's no one ever went in there. It was basically a private bathroom. It was great.
Yeah, good scope.
Yeah. Overrated, I'm gonna say the athletic facilities, the field house, all that stuff. They're really nice facilities, but as a non-athlete student, it was really hard to like get in the facilities. Like the weight room would be reserved at certain times, the track would be reserved. So it's a great thing to show off to prospective students, but in actuality, it was kind of hard to use all the time.
I think that's a fair take. So my overrated is the Wells Towers. Everyone I knew that lived in the Wells Towers just partied all the time, and when you went there, it's this whole different vibe. I can't explain it, but I didn't like the vibe of the Wells Towers.
A lot of people didn't like living there.
I was gonna say I don't think they were ever highly rated. That'd be my take.
Well, it had jitters. Remember jitters?
It did have jitters, yeah. You can do overrated, underrated, same place. You can do that.
You could. Underrated, I was going to go bowling alley too. I think, was it you, Carl, that said that?
Yeah. My friend did. We both did.
Yeah. Definitely underrated and underutilized, I think. But the other underrated part was the stage in the UC where they held like comedy shows and things. I don't know if anyone ever went to those. Same with the movie theater in the UC. Like they showed like movies that just came out for $1. You couldn't beat it.
Yeah, movie theater was really good. I went to the stage once to see a comedian. He was really bad, and we walked out. So that was the last time I think I went to the stage. But
there you go. So potentially overrated for you.
Yeah.
Okay, last one before we call it. Local spots in Whitewater. Most overrated, most underrated. Thinking outside of campus. Frem, we'll kick back off with you.
Yeah, so wasn't the biggest party animal, but I'm gonna sound like it when I'll tie it together. So I think bar scenes like Pumpers Mitchell, very popular bar scene. Just I guess it was cool that they were like two bars connected to each other, but I don't know. I always lost people in there, and it never seemed to be a great place to like hang out. Or shoot pool or do anything in there. So it's kind of more of a loud dancing place that kind of felt like a maze to walk through. And then I'm gonna go with your hangover food, Jessica's next day. It's your classic dining food. Still to this day, when I go through Whitewater, go to a football game, gotta get Jessica's before the game. One of the few places you can have spaghetti on the side. So I'm just gonna say that. I don't know how many restaurants you can have spaghetti on the side as a side dish. So gotta love Jessica's. I think it's like the staple like restaurant in the town of Whitewater.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of stole my answers. That's fine. But here's what I'll say about Pumpers and Mitchells I don't like is that the dance floor actually isn't that cool. That's the thing. Like, it's actually not that big. It's not that cool. It was pretty dirty.
Sticky.
It wasn't good. And then underrated, I also had Jessica's, and I don't want to steal Carl's, so I won't say it. But what I love about Jessica's is it was just always so consistent and it was pretty cheap. I also really loved Rosa's, which I know some people were all on Toppers or they were all in on Gus's, but Rosa's was my favorite, especially the cheesy sticks.
I'm interested to see what Phil was gonna say was my underrated. I spent a lot of time at Dimers at Pumpers and Mitchells. Maybe that's what you were gonna say. But no, for me, underrated burgers at the Brass Rail were criminally underrated. Like, I don't know if that place would pass a health inspection, but the food was really good. And 25-cent wings at Fat Jack's was also really good.
That was my backup option, Carl.
Yeah.
Fat Jacks, yeah.
For overrated, Randy Fun Hunters. I didn't feel good anytime I went there. And then both Mexican places, Karina's and Cozumel, because Whitewater didn't have like any place where you could take your parents out or go on a date. It was those were the only two, and they were okay. And then I'm just gonna put Gus's on here because I don't know why. Like, Gus's was awful. So that, like, it just pure anybody that liked it, Chris, you're smiling. Like to me, that's overrated. And then finally, overrated is anywhere where Chris wanted pizza from, because he had awful tasting pizza, because he would always want to go where there was like a deal, regardless of the quality of the pizza. Other than Rosa sometimes, but he'd want to get Gus's or some of those other places that weren't quite good.
Carl, I'm surprised you didn't say Denny K's, but maybe in your head it was just appropriately rated.
That's
Denny K's is it's not Denny K's anymore. So it's I spent a lot of time there. That was an amazing place.
I should have hung out with you more, Carl. That bar was awesome.
Yes. Yeah, you should have, Phil, but you were hard to get a hold of. You still are.
Your phone still dies in 2024.
Yeah.
So.
Regrets.
Yeah, so Carl, I'm offended, but also my most underrated is Gus's Pizza. Their cheese sticks are much better than Rosa's, much better than Toppers. They are the best cheese sticks I've ever had at a pizza place.
Can we still get them?
Their pizza's average. What's that, friend?
Can we still get them today? Can we do a taste off still?
You can. I just had them on Saturday.
Oh, really? Wow.
I did. So the cheese sticks. The pizza, yeah, it's fine. Whatever. But the cheese sticks are what you go for. My most overrated was probably the downstairs. I don't know what it's called. I don't even know if it's a place anymore. But I feel like that's where all the people went. And anytime I went there, I just never got a vibe that was interesting. I always ended up leaving in about 5 minutes. And speaking of underrated, the Boar The Boar was massively underrated.
Boar was solid.
Did you guys ever go to Kill the Keg at the Boar?
Yes.
Where they would tap a keg of beer, and it was free beer until the keg ran out. And that was it. That was their special on Thursday nights.
Good times. I was thinking my favorite bar is probably the pub, I would say. That probably was my favorite place. Go-to place.
I'd be curious what's still around and what's not.
Yeah.
Guess I haven't paid that close of attention.
Gus's has a 4.5 out of 5 on Google ratings.
Yeah, it's good.
With like over 400 reviews. So, yeah.
Sorry, Carl.
We do a taste off. We're gonna get to Whitewater, Carl. We're gonna do this up. Get all the cheese sticks in town. Let's do it.
Under its service options, it says has fireplace.
That's what we want. We want a fireplace.
Check. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end. This is probably the longest podcast we'll ever have. And I'm good with it because we got to bring Carl along. And I feel like Carl's much better than us. I want to bring him back. What do you think?
Some votes?
We need to bring Carl back. Yes.
We do. Well, let's just, before we end here, we never heard Phil's side of the story. Do we want to, Chris, do we want to give him that opportunity? I don't know.
Yeah, Phil, so do you want to defend yourself on the punching incident before we head out?
I do.
The floor is yours.
Carl was being mean to me, per usual, and I made a mistake, flipping the pizza over a little bit. Not my best moment. But he leaned into me a little bit too much, and I had had enough. And so it felt like the punch was necessary in the moment.
What did
Carl
you say
is
to
not
him, Carl?
known. Carl is not known to egg anybody on. I don't know what you're talking about.
Never. But that, for me, that was kind of our friendship, though. First time I met him, he made fun of me for liking the NBA. It's fine. You know? It's okay.
Did I? I don't remember that. I mean, it makes sense, but
You did. Chris told you that I like the NBA, and when we lived together for that semester, and you were like, "Oh, so you watch the NBA, huh?"
Hey, it's all coming back now. I remember that.
Yep.
There's a lot of good Phil stories. Carl and I once waited on the couch of the apartment that Phil and I lived at because there was an article in the Royal Purple that said a Philip A. Schultz stole from Walmart.
I told my neighbors this story this weekend.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a Philip A. Schultz, either with two L's
No, it was
or
a T.
with a T. It was at the T and the Schultz. But I had a lot of people ask me about that. And I think it's really funny that Whitewater actually published all of their criminal violations for all to see.
They did.
That was awesome.
It was awesome. I wonder if they still do that. We also got the Constant Gardener out of the Royal Purple. So it's a lot of good that came out of that newspaper.
And Maddie will be on for a Bucks correspondence soon, right?
He will. I already got the questions about the Constant ready to go. I need to know more. Any final thoughts before we head out for the night?
Thank you, Carl. We appreciate it. You dropped a lot of knowledge on all of us. I'm still going with Cold Stone.
So good. I really wish he would have done that in his peak. Because Cold Stone was a big deal when it first started. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Yeah, I do.
Carl, I'm also thankful for you. I'm sad that I didn't get to, mingle with you guys earlier. So 9 o'clock, that's what I saw. I apologize to the viewers.
Yeah, I would have loved to talk to you more, Phil, but to be honest, I didn't expect anything else, and I was, if we're talking overrated, underrated, like this experience was properly rated, for you showing up on time. So, I love you, Phil.
Apologies to all the things we said about you, Phil, in the first half of the pod. So just gonna say right now, we apologize. So, on record,
there's unconditional love here. You guys can treat me how you want. That's all I'll say.
We are a podcast of ELE. Everybody love everybody. Phil, I'm going to let you send us out tonight.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the games. Go Iowa women's basketball. Everybody wants to see Caitlin Clark get a national title. Down with UConn. Love you guys. Have a good night.